Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities via a number of different modalities. This show is obviously one of them. We also have a Facebook group, and we can be found at liveauthentically.today/FB. I'm also super pumped because I just released my first book. It's called Soar, SOAR, and it's on Amazon, available in audiobook, paperback, and Kindle. And it's an experiential spiritual journey through my divorce process and shows how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. So I'd love to have you check that out next time you're on Amazon. And I'm actually also a spiritual life coach. I work with individuals and groups, and I would love to work with you. So reach out to me if you would like me to help you on your journey. So today I am super pumped to have with me Luke McLean. Hey, Luke, how are you?
How are you, Pam?
I'm doing well, thank you. Thanks so much for joining me today.
Pleasure.
So a little bio on Luke before we jump into the interview. Luke grew up playing every sport under the sun. His love of sports led him to becoming a personal trainer. In 2010, Luke took a job as the Cotton On Group's personal trainer. That role led him into a decade of corporate wellness and mindfulness coaching. Luke has spent the last decade with a deep focus on holistic well-being and meditation. When he's not coaching or with his wife and 5 kids, you will find Luke on the trails or in the surf. Love that bio, and I can't wait to hear your story today. But before we jump into that, I always start my show off with the same, it's kind of my signature podcast question. And that question is, drum roll, are you ready? Okay, what does it mean to you to live authentically every day?
Great question, Pam. I feel like there's an energy within that you can tap into and live from, and that shows up, in your speech, in your actions, in your behaviors, in your habits that connect back to your truer self, and that feels just real to you. There's no mask. There's just an openness of who you are, and almost a courage to live from that place.
Love that. That's such a great, insightful answer. And I'd love for you to dig a little deeper on that. And I'd like to hear about more about your journey to that place.
In reflection on that, I think we're wired and just wired to feel. Everything we do in life is to feel something. Every action is based on a want to feel something. And often that feeling is to want to feel enough, to feel accepted, to feel safe, to feel part of something bigger. So I think, Pam, that journey for me has been an insight into what am I trying to feel and what is the void that's missing within me that I'm trying to search for to feel that. And sometimes the behaviors and sometimes the actions and the journey we go on can actually lead us further away from that feeling, even though we think it will give us that, but it actually doesn't. And we can, show up empty sometimes. So I think that's where that comes from, is that understanding of those feelings and that want to feel.
That is absolutely brilliant. I love that answer. And I would love to hear your reflections on, you said sometimes we're actually led down a different path, right? Further away from that feeling of, of what it feels like to connect to the essence of who we are. How do you think society conditions us to navigate our world? How do you think it it guides us? And where do you think we may have some missteps or kind of some misalignments in that process?
I think businesses have made a lot of money on people feeling not enough and discontent, and the idea that if we buy this, if we experience this, if we do this, this might give you that shot in the arm of happiness, of joy. And so we keep on searching. The problem I feel, Pam, is that's actually led us further away from our true and authentic selves, and we're trying to be that version of someone else's portrayal of who we are. And then we become really lost and we don't know where we're going. We actually don't know who we are. And it's almost, the analogy I use, it's like a little kid lost in the woods, and they don't know where they've come from. They don't know where they're going to. And all of a sudden they're stuck in this life of, attachment, aversion and sort of wanting, but not sure what they're wanting. And, we see people, and I do a lot of work with people who are really lost in that space.
Yeah, I love that you shared that. And what does that look like? I mean, what are some things that people can recognize in their own life, either through, behaviors or tendencies or patterns or coping mechanisms? What are some things that people may be doing that are unbeknownst to them, leading them down that path, kind of down that path away from their authentic self?
Yeah, there's plenty of behaviors. I think shopping online for stuff that you don't need to try to wear something that's going to make you feel a certain way. You might wear it once, but all of a sudden that wears off, and understanding that that's then all you go and need the next outfit, or you need the next device, the next thing, and then that'll give you a little hit. Eating food just out of habit and not out of nourishing the body. There's a lot of behaviors and habits we do that people have projected on us that we think will give us some sort of happiness, some sort of joy. And they might momentarily, but over a long term, they don't. And the problem is the outcome of that is we can get ourselves in lots of debt, or we can be so, fearful or dependent on our careers and our jobs to look and feel a certain way, that if those things go astray or, don't go to plan, we're in worse shape than we were because we're so dependent on other people's circumstances.
Yeah. And what are some of the first steps someone can take? Let's say they're feeling really lost, or they're feeling like they're engaged in certain behaviors that aren't productive or that don't serve them. What are some of the first steps someone can take to kind of redirecting themselves towards that path of authenticity and connecting with who they are?
Yeah, I think, Pam, the mindfulness piece is actually the ability to come back into the present moment, because a lot of those decisions and a lot of those, behaviors come from a future view or from a past view, the past view of I'm not enough, I'm not good enough, or the future view of if I get this career, if I earn this much, then I'll be happier, or then that'll be it. So it's always, our anxieties, our fears, our worries predominantly live in past or future. Right now, in this very moment, when we can connect back to the body or the breath, there is no fear, there is no anxiety, there is no feeling of not being enough. So when we can visit and frequent that place of presence more often, a lot of that alleviates and drops away.
Love that. I know that mindfulness is a big piece of who you are and what you do and what you teach. But before I want to hear all about that, but I would love to hear about your story. I'd love to hear about how you came to this point in your evolution, how you came to doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I played a lot of sports as a kid, and what I realized, in reflection is I used sports, and I got quite good at a lot of sports, and I use that as an avenue to acceptance. When you're good at a sport, then you find a team or you find like-minded people. And if you're sort of close to the top of the heap on that, there's a lot more acceptance in that, and there's a lot more status involved if you're the best player on the football team. And, so I guess I fed off that energy a lot and saw that as my gateway to feeling fulfilled, was that if I'm good at a sport, and realized that was a huge part of my ego and my archetype as the hero, that I'd realized that was where I could find self-acceptance. Some more inner work a bit later on was realizing that, that's okay if it's a healthy relationship to the ego, but when it becomes unhealthy and that becomes an attachment of who we need to be, the law of impermanence, that's always going to change and never going to be. We're going to get older and sport's going to sort of leave us, that we've got to find, contentment in who we are and become enough beyond the sport. So that was sort of me, and changing my relationship to sport, not as to compete or to be better all the time, but to just enjoy it for what it is, was sort of where I landed on that.
And was there a particular catalyst or aha moment or experience that you had, kind of a heart awakening catalyst that caused you to say, you know what, hey, I think I need to do things a little bit differently?
I played sort of what you call semi-professional football for a lot of years, and I retired from that, and then I went straight into Ironman triathlon. Again, I had this realization that I was feeding the ego, where I felt like I was doing really good through physical well-being, but there's always a cost. And at that stage, I had 3 kids. So the cost of me doing Ironmans and training 25 plus hours a week, the cost of that was on my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that they didn't need their dad or their husband to train 25 hours a week to feel accepted. They wanted their dad just there more often. Then I had to understand do I want to continue to punish my body and to spend more hours training, or do I want to be a more present father, and deciding what that looked and felt like, and then finding the middle ground of that. So the awakening for me was, how do I want to show up as a dad and as a partner for the next 20, 30 years? And the realization came from there, I guess.
I love that you're able to do that kind of that self-reflection and really kind of get to the root of it. What 3 self-awarenesses did you learn about yourself during that time? You were doing the triathlons. I mean, what did you discover about yourself?
Things like time management, things around connection, community that didn't have to be sports related. So I took those learnings and applied them more to meditation and mindfulness and coaching. So I got that. And that my family and my wife love me sort of not based on who I think I was or had to be, but just me as a more holistic person, which was, a nice way to accept that, which is really important to me.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. Let's talk a little bit about your lifestyle, because I know that, this holistic lifestyle, this overall well-being, mind, body, and spirit approach is just so incredibly powerful. And I believe that that's an approach that's, under talked about, it's under discussed, it's under publicized, because it's very much a preventative, very much kind of a proactive approach to life, health and wellness. And, I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, but I think a lot of our systems are built on, reactivity, or just responding to symptoms, to health issues when they come up. So I think I love the holistic lifestyle. I follow it. I work with my clients and on that. And I think that it's so incredibly powerful. So I'd love to hear you talk about lifestyle, just the importance of adopting, an overall sound regimen for keeping your mind, body, and your spirit nourished.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think for me, one of my values is service and giving to others. So that value underpins a lot of my lifestyle well-being, I guess, disciplines and regiments, because I feel like if I need to be in good mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual shape to give that to other people. And if I'm not, then I'm not giving the best version of myself to them. So that's really where it stems from. But then the look at what is wellness, that question of what is wellness. And there's a lot that can even be pulled out of that particular question in terms of, is it physical well-being? But if someone's in really good shape and looks amazing and, but they're unhappy, are they really well? So again, that question, and if someone's in really good mental shape, but they're 45 kilos overweight, are they well? So holistically looking at what well-being looks like, and it's again back to energy. It's the energy to live, with the vitality and true to yourself that's really healthy, and that being physically, that being emotionally, that being, in a career that you like, that you love, that's fulfilling. I think fulfillment's probably one of the underutilized aspects of wellness, of are you fulfilled in how you're living, has a huge impact on people's well-being, because again, you can be in great physical and mental shape, but if you're not fulfilled, you're always going to fall short. So for me, nature's huge. To spend time in nature, weekly, if not daily, is massive for my well-being. To walk barefoot, to continue to nourish myself so I can nourish others, has been sort of my philosophy in that.
Love that. What are some barometers that people might be able to watch for, that they might be experiencing, that would, kind of illustrate or highlight that maybe they're not feeling as good as they thought they were, or maybe they're not as sound in mind, body, and spirit as they thought they were? Again, not a judgment, just to bring awareness to it, because I think so many people just kind of go through life and think, well, I need to, to work really hard and slay it every day, and then just wake up and do it again the next day. And that's just the way it is. I hear that a lot from my clients. Well, I thought that that's just the way it is. And I'm like, no, that it doesn't have to be the way that it is. Life is about harmony, right? It's about keeping all aspects of your life kind of going in congruence, going at the same time. And sometimes some are more prevalent than others. But over time, everything just kind of balances out. And it's about feeling good, not just looking good in the mirror, but just feeling good and feeling at peace and feeling fulfillment. And those are all such really nebulous concepts, I think, and it's hard for people to grasp exactly what that feels like. So maybe we could start by talking about, like, what types of emotions, what things do people experience when they're not experiencing or enjoying wellness in mind, body, and spirit? Let's start there.
When you're not experiencing it, I feel like there's a feeling of discontent. And that discontent can just be, it's like a hum in the background. It's like an air conditioner that's going or a heater that's going in the background where you just become used to that feeling of discontent that's there, but it constantly hums. There's constantly a hum of not feeling good enough, and it just sits there all the time, and it's just always future, or it's always, a rehashing of the past. So I think that can be a really good sign that are you feeling deeply content with who you are, with what you're doing. I find a lot of people don't like to sit in that space, in that stillness of who am I? And if it's like the onion, if you start to take the layers off that person, there's a feeling of being nothing, and that really scares people. If you don't have that relationship with yourself, and if you don't felt, probably there's a bit of deeper work that you need to do on yourself. Because when we hold on to very little, there's not a lot that can pull us apart, and we're just okay with what is. And that creates a greater sense of equanimity.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I'd like to go back to that word equanimity. I absolutely love that word. I use it often in my practice. But let's talk a little bit about, like you said, people aren't comfortable. They're scared to sit in that space of stillness, right? That space of solitude, because there's no buffers anymore, right? There's no distractions. There's no busyness. So let's talk about that a little bit. I think that, again, so many times we don't even realize that we're distracting ourselves. We're busying ourselves we're really just trying to, we're avoiding, right? We're avoiding facing our truth. So what are, again, some things I'm trying to, I'd like to kind of highlight some tangible things that we can identify, help people identify in their life, so that they can begin to make the changes that they want to make to reconnect with who they are. So what are examples of some distractions or some things that get in the way of connecting with our true selves?
The key distractions, like our social media, our devices, those behaviors that we unconsciously have our phone in our hand and want to fill moments up, even when we've been given a gift of space. We could be standing waiting for a coffee, and we've got all of a sudden this gift of space where we could then self-reflect and go, okay, am I happy? Instead of just connecting back to our true self, with that little bit of 3 minutes of space to wait for our coffee, we'll go straight to our phone and we'll fill that time on our phone because we don't want to sit in that space of connecting back to ourselves. The reconnecting to ourselves is a practice. It's a practice of meeting ourselves where we are every day, every hour within every day, to go, okay, is it useful to be thinking about, work while I'm playing with my kids?
Right.
We've become so good at distracting ourselves and to being disconnected from the moment. We've practiced that, so our muscles have become very strong at that because everything else is pulling us away.
Yeah, that's so important. It's so true. And that's what this whole spiritual journey is, right? It's a process of making kind of the unconscious conscious. We're just so accustomed to operating kind of in autopilot, and we really do need to make it, it's a practice of turning the unconscious into conscious by asking ourselves those questions, right? Running it through the filter of, is this the best use of my time? Does this serve me? Does this move me forward? And I feel like, that kind of gives people a framework from which to operate, to make those conscious decisions that propel them forward and support their growth and transformation. Let's give people a little starter kit. If they're thinking about, okay, yeah, I love how all this sounds, but what can I do? What are some very basic, accessible action items that people can incorporate into their life on a daily basis that would help them to connect?
Yeah, just a brain dump where I start the morning by just getting a piece of paper, a journal, and just beginning to write whatever I feel comes into my awareness or, and comes out of my head. And it might start with, I don't feel like writing today. This is a waste of time, and then just continue to let anything that comes into my awareness go onto the paper. And that practice allows space of whatever's in my head and whatever I'm thinking to find a place on some paper. And all it's doing is creating space in my head. So when I'm having a conversation with you or with someone else, I've got space. I'm not thinking about the conversation from yesterday because I've written that down. Mm-hmm. So again, that ability just to really dump out anything, and just 10 minutes, half a page, whatever it is. Again, what does fulfillment look like for me today? It's questions like that, creating subliminal messaging, and we're just writing that. And like advertising, we're then creating a narrative of what that looks and feels like. So what you're consuming, are they giving you energy? Are they moving you closer to your authentic self? So if it's not growing you in the area you want to grow, then getting rid of that community is really important. If you got messaging in your house that's promoting you at your best, is it, positive messages, or is it negative things? So again, your environments are huge on how it affects your energy and you as a person, because you're consuming that all the time. So there'd be a couple of things that I'd start with.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to go back to one of my favorite words that you used a little while ago, equanimity. Let's first define that for those people who may not be familiar with that concept, but I absolutely love that word and everything it embodies. So I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so equanimity, a lot of the teachings that I do, Pam, are Buddhist informed. So, and it's really, one of the final steps of stepping into a more enlightened self is this sense of just being okay with the moment as it is and not as we hoped it would be. And that sense of equanimity is an acceptance of what is, and also an acceptance and not averting or pushing away what we don't like. So we can just simply sit in the moment as it is. And that equanimity takes a huge amount of self-awareness and open awareness to be able to observe that, because we realize that there's a whole heap of judgments, comparisons that are just playing out in the background that most of us don't even realize they're there. And when we can notice them and just accept them as well, we become more equanimous. And with equanimity is almost a gateway to resilience, because once you're really feeling that equanimity and you're just okay with whatever shows up, a lot less hooks us in it, and we would get a lot less dragged into feeling of discontent and just feeling like, we're going to get hooked and get angry or get judgmental or get reactive. We just sit in it and just be with how it is. Right.
It's such just a peaceful place to be, just to feel so just calm and poised and have that composure. It's an amazing place to be. And, and having been there for quite a while now, I can quickly notice when I'm kind of pulled out of alignment, out of that place of equanimity, and, from doing the self-awareness work, and then just make the small adjustments to get back to that place. Because life is just so much sweeter when we're able to accept, when we just accept, rather than resisting, and flow with it and know that there's a divine plan behind everything, right? I mean, that's really the key here, is to really embody equanimity. We must accept and understand and embrace the idea that there's so much more than what we see in this physical world, right? There is a grand plan. There's a divine plan behind everything that happens. And we just need to kind of sit in stillness and accept and flow with it and trust the process, right? Trust the universe, trust the wisdom, the process, the knowingness, the knowledge of the universe, and let it do its thing. So I would love to hear you reflect on that a little bit, just this whole idea of, universe, universal energy. How do we trust something that we can't necessarily see, that we can't necessarily interact with the way that we interact with things in our physical world? What words of wisdom do you have for people to kind of tap into their God-given divinity and understand that, there is so much more to our lives than just the physical world?
I love what you said there. And there's just a reframe on sort of, again, how we see the world, how we see success in the world, and the ability to open ourselves up to something that's bigger than us, and to just sit with that, that life is bigger than us and there's more than just this. And I think it's really important to have that lens, to be able to almost imagining that there's a camera that zooms in and zooms out, to be able to zoom in on the moment and just, work and be focused and get that done. But then the camera lens can zoom back and see things as a bigger picture. And, again, with that equanimity of not attachment, not judgment, but just as it is. And there's a trust and an energy that it will work out. And when there's very little attachment, a lot more works out because you haven't got the projections or assumptions of how it has to be. So then you almost free the energy up for it to move in the way that it needs to move. And generally, we're blocking a lot of that energy and a lot of that divinity through our thoughts ourselves and not allowing ourselves to open up to what will actually happen. So, and then we see, as you know, probably better than anyone, we see signs, we see the things that come into our sphere because we've created the space.
Right. So beautifully said. Thank you. And so I'm wondering, how does spirituality help you to navigate challenging experiences in your life?
For whatever happens in a mental level, whatever happens in my sort of trivial life, to understand that there's a greater plan and there's more to life than just simply what's going on in my head. So that's where I find spirituality, and that might be running on a trail where I pause and I just simply sit for 15 minutes and meditate and just, earth and connect to a tree. And, that's what it looks and feels like for me.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I'd love to hear more about exactly how you help people on a daily basis, how you do your work professionally, who your clients are, things like that.
A variety of work I do is with teams and organizations around culture. So I do a little bit of culture work. Again, in really helping teams get clear on who they are and what they stand for. Mm-hmm. But then also, what are the behaviors, what are the relationships, what's the energy that's needed to deliver that outcome?
Love it. So what can people do then? How can they start to take steps to incorporate more mindfulness in their everyday life? What are some things that they can do on a daily basis, just on their own before they work? What are the benefits of mindfulness?
If you're feeling stressed or anxious, that anxiety and that stress, for most parts, unless there's actual fear, real fear right here and now, that lives in the future or it's lived in the past. It's not here. When we feel that anxiety or that stress or that reactivity, it's because we're either thinking about a meeting. That meeting might only be in 30 minutes time, but we're there, and that's giving us feelings in the body that show up as dis-ease. So when we can come back to the moment, we alleviate a lot of that stress and anxiety. So that's one benefit of it. And the question I ask people all the time, Pam, is when you're at your best, where are you? Like, what are some of the characteristics of you at your best? And people say, I'm calm, I'm clear, I'm in the moment. At our best, at our performance best, we're present. We're not worried about what's going to happen, what could happen. We're not judging. We're not in fear. We're just simply with it as it is. So it's a huge performance tool for leaders, for sports people, for people in the army. Mindfulness is being used in all high-level sports and societies right now because it's a performance tool, and also hugely important in our relationships. When we can listen with presence and be fully in the relationship, the elevation of that relationship skyrockets because we've got two present people.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Great examples. Thank you. So yeah, so many ways we can all incorporate mindfulness in our everyday living. So thank you for sharing those. I love everything that you've shared today. We're just about wrapping up here. I wish we could chat for a few more hours. It's just been such an engaging conversation. But if people would like to get in touch with you directly, what is the best way for them to do that?
Luke at lukemclean.net is my website. So yeah, you can just jump on there, have a look around. I've got some free meditations. I've got a podcast up. Yeah, I do a couple of different things. There's a lot of free resources. I try and give as many free resources as possible to get people started. So they can just jump on there, Pam.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that and for all of your time today, for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. So appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Thank you for the thoughtful and in-depth questions.
Yeah, it's been an amazing conversation. Thank you. And to all of our viewers and listeners, I would like to thank you as well. I believe that time is a choice, and I am grateful that you've carved time out of your day to come here and listen to all of the knowledge and wisdom that Luke has had to share with us today. I would also like to invite you again to my Facebook group, liveauthentically.today/FB. Next time you're on Amazon, check out a copy of my book, Soar. And also reach out to me at Pamela@liveauthenticallytoday.com if you would like information on my individual spiritual life coaching. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.